Two American states almost had a shooting war over Toledo? Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the woodland hike, this is the army of ticks that come home with you. The essential stuff in between. The personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm Brian Powers. Look, I've never been to Toledo. I'm actually planning on a trip there soon enough, but even so, it doesn't strike me as a location to have an honest-to-God war over. But that's just what almost happened. And the result led to an even weirder set of state boundaries. To begin with, map-making sucked almost as hard as government-making in the early days of our young nation. Northwest Ordinance was drawn up and passed by the Confederation Congress. Congress as it operated under the Articles of Confederation. In 1787, and it set out boundary lines thusly. If Congress shall hereafter find it expedient, they shall have authority to form one or two states in that part of the said territory which lies north of an east and west line drawn through the southerly bend or extreme of Lake Michigan. Translation: we're going to draw a straight line across the territory at the latitude. Those are the lines that run east and west, and you can remember that because you can climb latitude lines like a ladder. The latitude of the southern tip of Lake Michigan. So they did draw that invisible boundary line, and Congress did find it expedient to make a whole other state above that line because of the shortage of American cars and pizza with toppings that go all the way to the edge. Ohio came into being in 1803. Side note, sort of, but we'll get to that in a different episode. And drew their state map along the understood northern boundary line. It's worth mentioning here that their constitution was oddly specific about their northern boundary, including a no-take-backsies provision that they get to keep their boundary despite what any future survey might say. Interesting. Let's put a pin in that. The problem began in 1805 when the Michigan Territory came into being, using the 1787 Northwest Ordinance line as its southern boundary. In 1817, surveyors gave everything the old look-see, and that's when they noticed a fundamental problem in the earlier surveys. The tip of Lake Michigan was much further south than they had originally measured. First of all, high fives all around to Lake Michigan. But this also means that the boundary line between Michigan and Ohio is off by about 8 miles at Lake Erie. This is probably not the last time somebody got in trouble over just the tip. There was just enough distance that the city of Toledo and an entire strip of land that ran to the Indiana border were now in dispute. 468 square miles of it. Michigan claimed the city and the Toledo Strip, which sounds like the world's most boring exotic dance club, for its own. And the city of Toledo has been a part of the Wolverine state ever since the end. No, but Michigan did assume jurisdiction, built roads, collected taxes, and just generally acted like the rightful owner of the growing town. Meanwhile, Ohio seethed and schemed. The completion of the Erie Canal meant that the westernmost port city on the lake would be a vital industrial and trade hub, which would be a tremendous boon to whatever state owned it. And that's why Ohio got so oddly specific in its constitution. During the Constitutional Convention, a fur trapper delegate noted that the line everyone had relied on was based on a wildly incorrect map called the Mitchell Map, which we're definitely going to talk about at length someday. Ohio knew the boundary was wrong. Faced with this challenge, Ohio quietly wrote the oddly specific boundary clause into its constitution, and nobody really questioned it until Michigan surveyors discovered the discrepancy in 1817. It all came to a head at the end of 1833 when Michigan petitioned for statehood. Ohio? They wanted Toledo back, so their congressman successfully blocked Michigan's statehood unless it agreed to Ohio's original boundary line, and managed to hold the block in place for a couple years. In response, in early 1835, Michigan passed the Pains and Penalties Act, which banned any officials from other states from asserting jurisdiction in the disputed area. And that kicked off the only truly interesting rivalry between Michigan and Ohio. In this corner, the reigning legislative champion from the state of Ohio. He's coming to this fight with a previously accepted voter. He wants Toledo and he won't take no for an answer. Give it up for Governor Robert Lucas. our corner. He wants statehood. He's backed by former President John Quincy Adams, and he brings his youthful vitality to this fight. Make some noise for Michigan's territorial boy governor, 23-year-old Stephen Mason! The tensions were high. Both states raised militias several hundred strong, and each governor led them personally. Lucas and his general encamped with 600 men outside of town, while Mason and his militia of over 1,000 occupied Toledo itself. Both sides sat on opposite sides of the Maumee River, while federal officials desperately tried to intervene, with Lucas disbanding his militia, believing the federal efforts would succeed. Mason was determined to fight it out. In the Battle of Phillips Corners, Michigan's General Joseph Brown and his 60-strong militia of Wolverines cornered a group of Ohio surveyors and fired guns above their heads before arresting several of them. Ohio responded by naming the county in the disputed area for Governor Lucas. Michigan kept sending out militias to hunt down more surveyor parties. Blood was spilled when a Michigan deputy sheriff rode into Toledo to make arrests and was stabbed with a penknife by a man named Stickney, who promptly fled into Ohio. Oddly, he stabbed the deputy, but did not shoot the sheriff. Both sides remained petty as hell, arresting the other's residents, spying and filing lawsuits by the metric dozen. Attempts to de-escalate failed, and both states appropriated large sums to fund militias. It was estimated that Ohio's militia had 10,000 Buckeye soldiers, ready to fight and die for Toledo. Ohio decided to legitimize their claim to the area by appointing a judge and a sheriff and actually holding court in the Strip. But when Governor Mason and his militia of over 1,200 showed up on the appointed day to arrest them in the act, they found the Ohioans had just snuck away, having held court in the hours after midnight and before dawn. By the fall of 1835, President Andrew Jackson had had enough of inflamed tensions as militias gathered once again along the Maumee River. He removed Stephen Mason and appointed a new governor for the Michigan Territory, one who negotiated with Ohio to end the standoff. Michigan didn't care for that move, and they elected Mason as governor again the very next year when it held its first elections. But by then, the temperature had cooled considerably. And with some federal negotiation, both sides finally agreed. Ohio could have Toledo, and in exchange, Michigan would be given the portion of the state known as the Upper Peninsula. It seemed like a bad deal at first, until it became known how rich in resources the new land was. Even with the Toledo War finally over, the border still wasn't fully settled until 1915, when the governors of each state agreed on one last survey and shook hands across the final border. And that's a whole lot of words to say that because of a tip, Ohio almost got the shaft. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds were made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to tell me about a far less interesting Michigan-Ohio rivalry? Drop me a note. The address is yell@americanesoterica.com. More information on the show can be found at americanesoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America.